Name's Andy Primrose. This is the Isle of Ulva. This is the hostel on the Isle of Ulva. But I actually live on the Isle of Gometra, which is 8 miles in that direction. So a separate island. Gometra is a quite different place. I mean, the geology is different, and it's also because it sits on the western side. Ulva gets in the way almost of Gometra. So to get to Gometra, you've got to cross Ulva, which is this track, what we call the main road, which is just a track that goes across the north side of Ulva, drops down to the little causeway, the bridge that cross between Ulva and Gometra. But Gometra is kind of facing out onto the west, so it's a very exposed place to live. Today being an example, down here it's blowing overnight. It's blowing 70 to 80 mile an hour winds, and you don't feel it down here. On Gometra, everything's rattling, humping around. The seas are massive and everything else. So it's a different place. It's also a place where we live by simple means. So we don't have electricity. We live by candlelight and firewood, and so we don't have any services out there. So we don't have any telephones. We don't have any fridges or things like that. We all live just by a very simple life. I always say to people that the nearest plug socket is actually on here. Once you leave here, you kind of lose. That's your last plug socket until you get back here again. So it's for people who kind of like the simplicities of life, like being able to do things by themselves and live in I suppose in a simple way. Yeah. So I spend probably the majority of my time moving backwards and forwards between Gometra and Ulva. In the old days when we first came here, I mean, we didn't have nothing. We had no money. We didn't have quad bikes, and we were walking the track, and it's a 4-hour walk between Ulva and Gometra. We were living, growing our stuff, our food, and catching it in creel pots. Our firewood was what we could get from the beaches. So we'd pull that out on rucksacks, climb down down the cliff sides into the beaches, and pile that with firewood, and kind of worked out a kind of a 70-litre rucksack of firewood would last you in the wintertime about a day and a half. So that's all you did, because that's all you could do, because your life was just about providing food for yourself, heat, and light. Different now. We've taken on this place, which is the hostel. So I spend my time kind of going to's and froms, and I think I've done about 20 to 30,000 miles just driving to and from Gometra over the last 8 years. And I nearly every single day. It's like, particularly in the season, kind of I'll be doing it 7 days a week. But I do it Christmas Day sometimes if we've got people in here. So that's kind of what I do. Spend a lot of time mending things, because everything breaks. Absolutely everything breaks here. If you can't mend something yourself, do not come and live on an island, because everything breaks and you'll have to do it yourself. So quad bikes, boats, houses. I spend a lot of my time doing maintenance work, particularly repairing roofs, because the wind takes the roofs off, wind does everything, rain gets in, everything else. So a lot of time is done just repairing things, and then you spend a lot of time also hauling things up and down, so a lot of moving of bits and pieces of either for yourself or for other people. So do a lot what I call kit transports, or bits of this and bits of that, and trying to work out ways of getting something that's like inconveniently sized down the track. You're thinking, how do I get that thing, which is massive, down to Gometra along that track, places like that. So you have to use a lot of your mental power. So you don't get much time to stand and stare or enjoy yourself or go off and wander across the moor or across the island. It's a lot of time is just spending working hard, But then in the wintertime, when it's like this, because we live without electricity and light and everything else, we tend to go to bed really early because it gets dark around about 4:30, and you don't want to burn too many candles, so you'd be in bed by 7. And then you don't get up much before 8 or 9 because it's dark. So you kind of sleep long in the wintertime and then not much sleep in the summertime. So it becomes a more natural way of life because you begin to fit in with the rhythms of nature, the way that humans should live, kind of way. But we don't, because we got these things, electric lights. You learned to kind of be able to just... For instance, we had an electric quad bike for Ulva. It wasn't for us in Gometra. Had this really fancy electric quad bike. So there was an idea to kind of make the island kind of carbon neutral, so not to have petrol vehicles, everything else, because we don't have any roads. And we kind of got an electric quad bike, and it was like 20,000 quid. It lasted 9 hours. Because you just couldn't cope with it. And of course it's electric, so you can't fix it yourself. Whereas the quad bikes that we run are like battleships for a start. And also, they just work. And also, if they break, you can fix them because they're simple. They're easy things to fix. We always think it's like, this is the trouble with the movement towards modern a way of doing things, that, you know, everything's got to be electric and everything else, is that they are so complex that they break, and when they break here, they become just like landfill because you can't do anything with them. Whereas the old ways, where you hit it with a hammer and it kind of starts. So we got a tractor here that came here in the 1950s, an old Fergie 148, which is brilliant because it is 4 wheels and an engine, and that's it. That's all you need, and it still works, and it's brilliant. So yeah, keeping things simple here is quite important. I always said that, not for Ulva, but for Gometra, there's 2 ways to approach to Gometra. If you ever come to live on Gometra, one of which was to say, get rid of everything you ever owned or ever think you might need, and just come with nothing, which is what we did. And then you work out what you actually need. The other option is to treat it like some kind of emergency situation. And you get a great big container, you get a helicopter to lower it in onto Gometra, and in there is everything you might ever need in an emergency situation. Axes, chainsaws, medical kits, everything else. And that's the other way of doing it. But the trouble with that is that you're kind of missing a point. Is that if you get rid of everything, you divest yourself of all manner of stuff, you turn up, I don't know, with like we did, with just like a saw and a knife and a method of lighting a fire, then you work out what it is you actually need. And I think a lot of times that's why a lot of people struggle with the idea of living on Gometra, because not many people have ever really wanted to live there a long time. You get people will live there for like a year or 6 months, but they don't want to do 2 winters because it's really hard. Is that you can con yourself into thinking that you can be self-sufficient for about 18 months. You can do a winter and then a summer, and you get to that point. But if it isn't actually part of your life, it isn't actually what you're doing, then you kind of almost like you run out of puff. You know, you can hold your breath for so long. Like, I gotta hold my breath for 18 months. Eventually you have to breathe. You realize, no, it's not for me. So that tends to be what happens with folk, is they'll come and do a wee bit, and then they'll say, yeah, no, that's fine, done it, but do you know what? I quite like electricity. I quite like a fridge. Things like that. If you like your takeaways and if you like your stuff like that's... I mean, for us, getting a fish supper, for instance, is like, wow, a fish supper, you know. And it used to be such a rare beast for us. I mean, we could go years without having a fish supper. And, you know, it's just like, oh, wow, a fish supper. But the mechanism of getting a fish supper to Gometra is quite complex, you know, and it takes a long time. And so we never did it. But yeah, if you like your takeaways and stuff like that, that's something that you will miss. But then you kind of, if you're living from the land, you know, you've got crab, brown crab. You've got your langoustines. You've got and you're growing in your garden and stuff like that. And some of these are delicacies that people will pay a pretty penny for. So you can never starve on an island. Well, you can. There was an old thing I think someone talked about once. There was a guy, he got marooned on a Irish island. I can't remember now how he ended up being marooned on it. But anyway, he was there for a couple of days. When they found him again, and he was starving, and they looked at him and said, "Why are you starving?" He said, "You're surrounded by food. There's shellfish everywhere. There's can eat seaweed. Everything else. So you can starve, but it's only because you don't know how to look after yourself, I suppose. But you never starve on an island. So, but yeah, you might miss your Indian takeaways, your Chinese and stuff like that. Work is always difficult. Solitary work on anywhere in the Highlands and Islands is always a bit of a difficulty. So a lot of people have many jobs, that won't just have one, they'll have many. Ulva itself is kind of the same as everywhere else, except for the fact that finding work on Ulva is more tricky than like on Mull. On Mull, obviously, you can move around, there's more options for work, but if you're going to find work on Ulva, you kind of need to make it up yourself. So a lot of people who come here, some of them have come to run the boathouse, the restaurant, which is really popular in the summertime. Other people come here, and I kind of made it up as they go along, so some of them will take on some odd jobs, like there's a lot of work for doing changeovers. For instance, on Mull, people want changeovers for these holiday cottages and stuff like that. Or building work is another thing that some people do. Fencing is other people do. If you can turn your hand to manual labor, you never be short of work. But you will, if you're looking for a traditional employment on the islands, that doesn't tend to work. So if you can create a work yourself, that is the way that it tends to work here on the islands. I mean, once or twice that people... I mean, with the boathouse, that has been a route in for people who they come here because they're going to run the boathouse. But that's rare. It's a rare thing to do. So, I mean, for instance, my jobs, what do I do? Okay, so I run a hostel. That's one thing. I got another body out on the north side of Ulva. That's another thing we do. I've got 2 bodies on Gometra, which I don't run, but I do the kit transports for folk who want to go out there, and I do the firewoods for all the places, and I got the 2 yurts. And then I also got, I do rope access for roofing, particularly these big houses where getting scaffolding here is, well, you never do it. And if you could, it'd be so expensive. So I do rope access, I do building maintenance, I've got other bits and pieces I'll do, and it's all part parcel of a kind of they call it a collection of jobs. Most of the time, what I find is that I don't have enough time to do any of them, so I'm always pushed for time. I'm always thinking, Christ, I should have done that, I should have done that. So I'm always busy, we're always doing something. I always had this idea, but in the wintertime, because everyone asks, what do you do in the winter? It's always a classic thing. So, what do you do in the winter? It's like, and there's this kind of thing, when I'm in the season, because in the season here in the hostel, because this popular hostel, it's like, work is 18-hour days, 7 days a week. And then you think, I guess into the season. And it'd be in the winter, and it'd be nice, everyone's gone, the ferry stopped running, so there's not visitors coming in and guests and everything else, the hostel's closed. Sit down and I'll read a book, and I'll stare outside. And I'll do those things I'm irritating, and it doesn't work that way. And you kind of get through the season, and you get through the winter, and you think, because you're doing all your maintenance work and stuff like that. And then you get to March, you think, okay, well, that was quick. and then the season opens again. So it's no, it's always busy. And I always think if somebody is kind of sitting here, kind of on an island, kind of like sitting there twiddling their fingers, don't know what, it's like, yeah, you haven't engaged yet. Because if you're not overly busy, then something, yeah, you ain't thinking about this too hard. Because that's the one thing islands lack, is people. So this is what the Ulva experiment is about. It's about repopulating an island, and that's the important thing of it. There's been a lot of islands like Egg and Gear and have got where you've got a community that's bought the island, so it's a community-owned island. But there was already people on the island. You know, people living there. Egg had 60 people living on Egg. I don't know about how many people here, but there was already a community there. Ulva's a different thing because there was only 5 people, 4 of them from the same family, and there were only 3 adults. So that's not a community. It's just there were some people left. So you're having to rebuild a community. I think it is a big island, and there is a level by which you drop below where there is no longer a community, not a viable community. And so that community needs to rebuild, and it comes from actually having people, having the right kind of people. So people who can, you know, get involved and want to be involved and, you know, do hard work and all these other things. It takes various types of people to come and do it, but you're not creating the community, because you don't create the communities artificially. The community should be an organic thing. It should develop itself, and so that's what Ulva's doing, and that's unique, because and there is no manual for that. This is page 45 of the manual that talks about how to build a community on a small remote Scottish island. So it is a kind of it's a guessing game as to what works and what doesn't work. But yeah, so at the moment what we need is people, but we're getting there. We've got 60 people in Ulva, so quite a few islands have only got a lot of islands are kind of fluid places, which pun, you know, people tend to come and go from islands, you know, and that's always been the way. You know, people will go away for a wee bit, come back for a bit. So when you talk about population on the island, that's quite a difficult thing, because there are people who might actually live on the island but are away for long periods of time and come back in minutes. So they're fluid places. But there are islands like, Gometra has got 3 at the moment people living on it full time, but in the summertime it might get up to 6. I know it gets busy. And then, but there are islands where the registered population is like 2, you know. But what does that actually mean in reality? Because it might mean, yeah, there's 2 people who pay the council tax who live on the island. But, you know, does that actually mean there's more or less? You know, it's a bit of a weird thing. So yeah, no, it's one of them. Back in the old days, 5 on Ulva would have made it one of the kind of, for the size of island, 5's tiny, considering, you know, this island is 5.5 miles long and about 1.5 miles wide. It's huge. It's was it acres? 5,000 acres, I think, or 5,000 hectares. I can never remember the one. It's 5,000 of one. Anyway, I think it's 5,000 acres of land, and there was 5 people. So if you think about it, that's, in the old days, that's 1 person per acre. That's kind of Alaska style kind of population density. There's the thorny question of where does the rubbish go? We throw it in the sea. No, we don't. Get everybody else's rubbish that comes washing it. So we don't. Ulva doesn't have, and Gometra, we don't have any of those on island facilities. So everything that's like rubbish, it gets taken by the residents in that black plastic bags, goes across on the ferry, and go off the ferry, and you put them in the bins. So the council gets as far as the pier on the end of Mull, and then we transfer everything across from the islands to to Mull. We did have a funny thing the other day, because of course in Gometra it's 8 miles to your bins, which is a thing. But we had a storm one of the storms came in, and this wheelie bin got washed in, and it was from Andover in the southwest. And we thought, is that them sending us our wheelie bin? So it's very useful. We get a lot of rubbish washed in, obviously. Some of which is useful, some of which is not. But yeah, getting rubbish off islands is a bit of a trick. And obviously, as the population grows, so the issue of the rubbish services and things like that, and post and all those things, become a bit more of an issue in terms of how do we make it more not efficient, but you can't have 100 people all carrying their bin bags. It's just like on an island with no roads. You can't have 100 people all with 100 quad bikes, because then you'd have a traffic jam with quad bikes. So what do? That kind of things. So those things have yet to be worked out. We haven't got to that level of sophistication yet. But Gometra, I think, will always be what Gometra is. We had the first year they did beach cleaning here, because we got beach cleaners who come in every year and do beach cleaning in Ulva. Great people. But there's always been an issue. It's like, how do you get all this great big stuff that gets collected on the beaches? How do you move it off? And the first year it got put in the car park on the Mull side for the council to come pick up. But the only trouble with that is Mull has only got a small little truck that they can only... And so there's this huge pile that's like 5 tons of beach rubbish. And it sat in the car park for like 3 months, and bits of it were getting blown out to sea again and everything else. And it's not a fault, it's just that is the issue. It's, we are an island off an island, which is off Mull. Mull is a small island in terms of its only population's 3,500. It's got limited facilities. And they were off off the mainland, which has got its own. So, facilities and those kind of things are always a challenge. And so people come here sometimes and thinking, oh, you can just do this. And then you think, no, hang on a moment. Have you thought that one through? Because yes, you can make a pile of rubbish. That's brilliant. I always said that to people. Because you get people come in here and they say, oh, your beaches have got all that stuff that you should be clearing it up. I said, yeah, okay. You can make a pile. We can make a pile. Making the pile is not the problem. It's what you do with the pile, what you made the pile. So, we have had people like that before. So I made you a pile of rubbish there. Brilliant, thank you so much. It's like, as if that's the hard bit. It's like, no, the hard bit is moving it. So, yeah. And then a big storm comes in, like, literally last night. So, and then all that lovely beach cleaning you've done is kind of like, did you bother? So, Ulva was renowned for these savage clearances that happened in 1848. So the then owner of the island, who was a man called Francis Clark, and he was the landowner. He was, and he had bought the island in 1835. And there'd been a few landowners prior to him who had the island after the loss of the Clan Macquarie chiefs. So this is all, Ulva is a Clan Macquarie island that had been for maybe 1,000 years. And then at the end of the 18th century, like a lot of the Highland chiefs, they got into financial difficulties. They ended up losing the island, having decided for their debts. And it went through a few landowners. And then this guy, Francis Clark, bought it in 1835. He was a lawyer from Morayshire. And we don't actually know why he decided to buy Ulva. There wasn't an immediate, nothing kind of makes it obvious as to why he wanted to buy the island. So in 1847, Ulva, unlike other places, had survived the first year. So the first year, elsewhere, potato blight hit in, but 1847 is the year it really kicks into Ulva. And Francis Clark basically clears the island of its tenants in a savage way. So there were other savage clearances like the Dukes of Sutherland further up the coast who did kind of savage clearances of their tenants. And a lot of people ended up all over the world. Some of them went quite local, i.e. to Mull or to Oban, and some of them ended up in the States or Australia. And the people who were too old, too firm, ended up at this place that was called Aired Glass, but is now called Starvation Point, where they had to build basically a terrace of houses. And they were there some of them were there for about 10 years, but each of the people were too old or too infirm to move, which is ironic because they were made to build the causeway at Brew and also build the pier down at the crossing. So there's an interesting definition of the way of being old or infirm. And then he burnt them out eventually. He set light to their roofs, he smashed their crockery. Sounds like he was trying to get his revenge on them. We think it's because they did treat him the way he thought, his tenants did treat him the way he thought he should be treated, with the respect. So it went down in kind of West Coast history as one of the most savage clearances that came up with the Napier Commission in 1888. So then you've got basically an island that has probably a population of 1,000 people at the turn of the 19th century. By 1880, there were 6, supposedly, still living here, which most of them were all of them were servants or a shepherd, and that was it. And really, Ulva never recovered from that. To this day, so tell truth, what we're doing, what's happening in Ulva is meant to be a kind of reparations for the clearances. Bringing a population back onto an island. And there was even talk about repopulating some of the townships right at the very beginning, setting up individual crofts on the islands to kind of repopulate the township areas. So a real kind of attempt to kind of reverse what had happened in the middle of the 19th century. Prior to that, Macquarie Island, and the Macquaries are famous because one of the governors, really early governors in Australia. And if you go to Australia today, there's a cairn in the capital, Canberra. On top of the cairn there's a stone which is from Ulva because of this relationship between this guy, Lachlan Macquarie, and Australia. And the Macquaries, the last chief, Lachlan Macquarie, was this guy who was 104 when he died. So born in 1715, so the year of the first Jacobite rebellion, but died in 1819 as a pauper on Little Coventry. So when he lost the island, he ended up fighting the American Wars, oldest lieutenant in the British Army, but really fell in hard times, had no money, ended up in Little Coventry, which is a horrible place to try get in and out of in any bad weather, and used to send letters to people about could you send money or a bag of potatoes. So as chief, he ended up in a really parlous way towards the end of his life. There was not much evidence or documentary evidence of the period prior to 1750s. People didn't read or write on these islands. They didn't leave that kind of literacy legacy behind. We have the townships, the buildings. We have and that's what we have in the landscape. And to tell the truth, it's trying to pick apart what you see in the landscape to provide this chronology that goes back thousands of years, because it's not just the townships. There's people have been living on this island and Gometra since the last ice age, but we really only had documentary evidence for about 1750. Before that, there are stories, songs, but we don't have a huge amount of evidence of the lives of the people. And the lives of the people here are basically living in black houses, which are these single-storied stone-built houses with turf or reed roofs, where you've got an open fire, it goes up to the roof, and they would be in farming, and in the springtime taking their cattle up onto the sheilings to go and take the cattle away from the farms up into the high ground to make butter and cheese and everything else, which was a huge part of their lives. There's a lot of song to do with that. And the later years, then they were kelping, which is producing kelp, which was this by burning seaweed. So that's a kind of, we don't quite know. Obviously, Ulva is a Norse name. It means wolf, but we don't know why it means wolf. It could mean that there was a guy called Wolf. Or it could mean the island had wolves. Might be. Oddly enough, at the bottom of the excavation, there's an excavation been going on for 30 years in the cave on the south side, where right at the bottom of the excavation trench, they found a wolf from just at the end of the last ice age. So it could be that, or, which is what Dr. Alistair White from Glasgow, who's the Gaelic expert, suggests, it might be the rocks of the south side resemble a wolf. The Norse tend to name a lot of things from how they look like from the sea. So if you ever want to understand place names on Ulva that are Norse, you should get out on a boat and look at the land from the sea. And then maybe it will, it looks like a, I don't know, well, that makes sense. So Ulva is a Norse name, Gometra is a Norse name. There's a lot of names of some of the townships are Norse, but we don't, unlike places in the Outer Hebrides and on the Orkneys, we don't understand hardly anything of how the Norse came here. All we know is that the Norse raided Iona very early on, the Abbey at Iona. But as to how the Norse came to live here, or how they integrated with communities, was it in a violent way? Which is one theory. Or did they actually just turn up and kind of married their way into this Gaelic community? We don't know. So it's an interesting. More research is needed. Right. So the Lammonts are quite I would say famous. They're quite known family, and so are the Blacks. So both families are quite well known amongst the history of the families from Ulva. Lammonts come from the western end of Ulva and onto Gometra. Tend to be wealthy merchants. This is this kind of misnomer people don't understand about the townships. They seem, when they look at these ruined townships, they think these are all peasants and they all lived at kind of like the same level, and it's not. There were different levels of wealth within these townships, a bit like the Italian city-state, basically. You kind of you kind of think, maybe go to a village, say in England, and if you took all the roofs off and all the doors and the windows off and just left the ruined houses, and you walked into them and, oh yeah, these are all people at the same level. Well, actually, no, if you put the people back in, you find there are people of quite wealthy, the middling people, wasn't there are poor people. So the same thing. And so the Lammonts are up, kind of wealthy-ish merchants, famous or infamous for the fact that one of your lot were poisoned on a famous case, were poisoned on a ferry coming back to the Clyde, which was laudanum poisoning by a woman for reasons unknown. Don't know why, but it was a case in its time, 1828. They lived, in Burness, in Ballygordon, which is the township of one of the cadet branches of the Macquaries, and this place called Clacklagallon, which is quite near what could possibly be this Viking fort, which is an interesting thing, because Clacklagallon, the name of it, might actually reflect this Viking period fort, Clacklagallon, possibly meaning place of the stones, or maybe place of the foreigner, which is even more interesting. And then the Blacks, who have come more towards the eastern side of Ulva on the north side. Again, Sorrowby, which is a Norse name. Mucky Farms, it means. And it is mucky. But it's... the blacks are kind of known because this guy, he's written... has done a lot of research on the blacks, and we know the blacks, kind of the guy he followed, when they were cleared, he went across to Salem on Mull, and then he ended up down in the Ross of Mull, and then eventually a lot of, I think, blacks ended this place Shot, which was his industrial town down in England, and then so you both sides, you've got these quite established, well, very established families living on the island. And of course, this is their English interpretation of their Gaelic name. So Lamont and Black isn't the Gaelic; it's the Anglicization of a Gaelic name of some kind. Just like Livingstone's is not a Gaelic name; it's an Anglicization of a Gaelic name. It's what happened when documents like leases and tenancies get written down. They get written in English because that was like in the old days, things got written in Latin because that was meant to be the Latin. That Latin was meant to be the educated language, but then things were written in Latin. The same thing, legal documents were written in English, so your name got translated into English. So you ended up with Lamont, or Lamont, as some people call it. But it's not Lamont. You're not French. But mountain, it's Lamont. Right. Surprisingly, there's a lot of cobblers. It's I never understood quite why. So cobblers. So shoemaking was quite a common profession for folk. I suppose people always needed shoes of some kind to do their work. Kelpie, so kelpers. So these are people who are involved in the kelp trade, which came in to Ulva at the 1790s. So these people are collecting seaweed off the foreshore or going out in small skiff boats and cutting it and bringing it there back onto shore, and then they're drying it, which happened in May time, because that's where you get the dry weather on these islands, and then you burn it in these, a bit like a charcoal burner. You get really hot inside, you restrict the air going into it, and then it creates this extremely odd thing that looks like volcanic material. And then you smash it up and you put it in a creel, which is basically a basket, and then they would set it on to the landowner, who would then set it on. And on Ulva, we're not quite sure how it went off. I have a feeling the reason why the main road does what it does is that they were taking it off on the harbour on Gometra, and then it was going down to the Clyde on puffers. We think that's why the track goes all the way across Ulva, across Gometra, all the way to this harbour on Gometra. So kelping was a thing. Then obviously there were people here who were you'd also be growing your own crops. So one of the things that did happen was folk were, the land that they were allocated or rented got smaller and smaller to force them to kelp, because that's what the landowners wanted. The landowners wanted people to kelp. They didn't want them to be self-sufficient. They wanted them to be kelping because that's where the money was coming from. That was the new craze. So oddly enough, Stafford MacDonald was this guy, a quite flamboyant character who bought the island, or had the island, in the early part of the 19th century. Actually created some shops on Ulva. So he basically took a black house and put a huge kind of open window in it with a counter, and there were 4 shops, and they had been found, and they got these weird things. So there was a kind of, in the 18th century, there was this 19th century, there was this kind of almost like opening up. People had money because they were kelping and everything else, and beginning of a cash economies and stuff like that. So I suppose that kind of leads it to things like people making shoes. So because obviously the people could buy shoes and stuff like that. So a change from what had gone previously, which had been a subsistence lifestyle based around animals, and growing either in the old days barley and oats and things like that, and not much fishing on these islands. Lobster catching, yes, but fishing not really. Not many people fished as such, but yeah, there was kind of lobster catching and stuff like that. These are the prime jobs, and then there were servants of the big house as well. So a lot of people I presume there were dairy maids and stuff like that. I think it's being self-sufficient, being in charge of your own life. A lot of islanders very independent-minded, which can have its downsides. But yeah, I always think that I always struggled in the outside world. Show me a piece of paper I've got to sign, or all these bits and pieces that you're forced to do in the big wide world. To work within a kind of institutional way. I find that very stressful. But if you want me to light a fire, or catch a crab, or hunt a deer, or all these things, I'm really happy with that. I have no worry about that. I don't mind fighting my way through a storm. I don't mind handling the boat. But you show me a tax return form and I will run a mile. So I think it is for people who like independence and like to be in charge of their own lives. I think there's also a great thing I know I complained about repairing things, but I quite like repairing things. I don't like things breaking, but I quite like repairing stuff. It gives you a sense of control. I think that's it. It's about agency. It's you get a sense of your own agency if living on an island like this, and that's quite freeing. But also with freedom comes risk. I always say that you kind of accept that, not so much in Ulva. I mean, Ulva is a different place because you've got electricity, you've got your access onto Mull is quite straightforward. It's just the ferry, it is an island, and when the weather's blowing up, it does make it more remote. But Gometra is not easy. So the more freedom you get, the more risk you take on, which is, as long as you don't mind the risk, but you also have to accept the risk. And the risk is things might happen. You might get medical issues on Gometra. There's two types of medical issues on Gometra. It's quite simple. One which is that you can get yourself out of it. And the second is you can't, in which case you make a phone call and they come get you a helicopter. And it is simple as that. It's so it could be as simple as like ingrowing toenail, gone septic, can't walk, helicopter. I tell you that because not famous story. It's not famous for us, but I suppose it's famous. So November night. So this time of year, November night, just like last night, big storm coming in. My wife has a pains down her right hand side, and I'm not paying much attention to it, but she said, I've just got pains going down my arm, and kind of like, okay. She said, I've looked it up. It could be I'm beginning to a heart attack. I'm like, okay. So we kind of look it up, and she said, okay, we can't rule it out. It's probably not, but we can't rule it out. There's nothing we can kind of grab or say is that, yeah, no, you don't have it. It could possibly be that. So you make a phone call. That's like, okay. So you go down like NHS 111, get the phone, and then because nowadays we actually have a mobile phone connection on which we did in the old days. You'd have to go and stand on the headland. But anyway, and they're kind of like, okay. They transfer you up the wire to like the 999 service. We then go, and then we have this long conversation. And the first thing you have to do with them is to say, we live on a remote island. There is no access by road, no access by boat at this time of night. And they go, okay. And then they give you a phone call back and they say, right, there's a helicopter coming for you from Prestwick. They will be there in 15 minutes, which is like, Jesus, well, that's 100 miles away down the coast. Fair play. Helicopter comes in. They're wanting to get in before the storm hits. They've never been to Gometra before. They didn't know Gometra existed. And actually, one of the reasons why they've come to get us is because it's like a test. Because they said, well, we didn't know you guys were living on the islands, so we didn't know Gometra existed. So this is a good test for us to go and see what it's like. Come in. We don't peer on their infrareds on the houses because we haven't got heat. So go around the quad bike, sit there with the lights on so they could get some idea where we are. They would go off and find their place to land. Lands in front of the big house in Gometra, which scares living daylights out of the guy. Gometra house fits at like 11 o'clock at night. He wasn't expecting this huge, great big helicopter land. Nicest people in this pike, and take on the track, grab my wife, do all the tests. I said, we can't rule it out either, so we're going to just pass you up. We're going to take you. And then she gets a whirly bird out to Oban. A&E takes her in, blah, blah, blah. And she wasn't having a heart attack, but they said you did exactly the right thing because we can't rule it out. Which is completely the reverse to what we did when we first came here, which is the way you should do it, which is that we were going to a party on Ulva. It was Midsummer's Day, and we were just coming down the brae from our house. We got off, and I can't remember why now, and my wife trips over her shoelaces, goes down her shoulder and breaks her shoulder. Fuck. We're towing someone else's trailer back of the quad bike, and my wife, being my wife, is like, stuff and nonsense. Just throw me back of the quad bike, and we'll deal with it when we get down. And so it's like this. I strapped her on the back of the quad bike. We're towing this trailer, which I was saying, should we just drop the trailer? She said, no, because he needs the trailer back behind the house. Okay. We're rattling down the track. We're going slow. We've got the trailer behind. We get down. She gets taken, get her onto the wee ferry. She goes across. I think I drove her to the GPs in the Salon. They said, you've broken your shoulder. You're going to have to go across to the A&E. So drive her down to the ferry. She gets on the ferry, walk on. She gets off the other. She walks up to the A&E in Oban from the ferry, which is about a mile. Gets in there. This has taken about, I think, 4.5, 5 hours by this point. She gets in A&E. They strap her up, and then they said, "Well, you can go and leave now." No, it's 7:30 at night. There are no ferries. And then what they said to us is like, next time, just call 999 and they'll send you a helicopter. This is the other way. It's just ridiculous. It's just stupid. So we learned, there are two medical emergencies. You can get out yourself, or they'll come with a helicopter. It's easy. Strange. So yeah, as long as you accept those kind of things, as long as you accept the risks, and are you willing to accept the risks, you get a lot of freedom. It's going back. So the journey back to Gometra is along the north side of Ulva. And then you get to the crossing point of the Gometra, and it's this, which is called Ambrew, and it's this like narrow stretch of water, kind of big bits of land either side, so it's like a wind tunnel. On a gale force wind in the winter, in the dark, your hands are frozen, and it's an hour's drive or an hour and a half drive on a quad bike, and you're just absolutely in the elements, and everything's been thrown at you at like 60 miles an hour or 70 miles an hour, and you're freezing to death. It goes through everything. You've got your survival suit on, your hands are freezing, your feet are freezing, your face is being kind of rubbed raw by whatever's being thrown at you, and you're thinking, Jesus Christ, why am I doing this again? Yeah, there have been times when I've actually stopped the quad bike and I just like turned it away from the wind. I just sat there and God, I'm just gonna wait 10 minutes. Just think, I want to do this. And there have been times, like I've been caught in thunderstorms on that track, out of nowhere. Just like went up the top once, and I just you got onto the high ground, you're high, and there's just like this blinding flash of light, and I was right in the thundercloud. And I'm on a pod bike. It's like there's no protection, and I just like, I'm just gonna turn around and go back down, and I'm gonna find something to sit in until this passes. Yeah, so that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, the drive or the walk, whatever you're doing, can in bad weather can be a real. Yeah, you gotta really want it, otherwise, yeah, you wouldn't do it. It's like people think we're mad to do it. I mean, we've been doing it so long now that, like I said, 20,000 miles maybe doing it. Some people, even on Ulva, think it's mad to do on a daily basis. It's crazy. It's like, why the hell put yourself through that misery?